The alarm system screamed across the Velen homeworld. Commander Thelis stood in the defense center, his long fingers trembling as he watched the displays. Red markers filled the holographic projection above his head. Each marker represented a Kreeth warship, and there were hundreds of them. How long until they reached the orbital stations? Thelis asked. His voice was steady, but his aide could see the fear in his large, gentle eyes. 6 hours, Commander, Thelis replied. She was younger than Thelis, barely past her first century. Her pale blue skin had gone almost white with terror. The stations have no weapons. We evacuated most of the staff, but thousands are still trapped. Thelis felt his heart sink. The Velen have never built weapons. In 3,000 years of civilization, they had never needed them. They grew food, they studied the stars, they wrote poetry and music. War was something they read about in the ancient histories of other species. Something barbaric and primitive. The Kreeth Dominion had changed everything. 2 months ago, their fleets had arrived at the border systems. They demanded surrender. When the Velen refused, the Kreeth started killing. Whole colonies were destroyed. Millions died. The Velen had no way to fight back. Send the emergency beacon again, Thelis ordered. Maximum power. Send it to the Galactic Council, to all our allies. Tell them we need help now. Thelis worked at her console, her fingers moving quickly. Beacon sent, Commander. But the Council already acknowledged our first message. They said they would discuss our situation in the next committee meeting. When is that meeting? 3 weeks from now. Thelis closed his eyes. 3 weeks. The Kreeth would finish their invasion in 3 days. The Council would debate and vote and follow proper procedures while the Velen civilization burned. He had always trusted the Council. He had believed in galactic law and order. Now he realized that law without action was just words. Keep sending the beacon, he said quietly. Maybe someone will hear us. The hours crawled past. The Kreeth fleet moved closer. Their ships were dark and angular, built for destruction. They fired on the outer defense satellites, turning them into clouds of debris. The satellites had no weapons, only sensors, but the Kreeth destroyed them anyway. They wanted the Velen to know what was coming. Thelis watched the orbital stations on his display. Each station held hundreds of workers, scientists, families. He could evacuate some of them, but not all. There were not enough transport ships. Some Velen would die today, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Commander, Thelis suddenly shouted. We have a new contact. Thelis looked up sharply. The Council sent help? No, sir. Unknown fleet signature. They just appeared at the edge of the system. The profile does not match any known species in our database. A new image appeared on the holographic display. Thelis stared at the ships and felt his confusion grow. The vessels were strange. They looked crude, almost primitive. They were not elegant like Council ships. They were blocky and asymmetrical, covered with armor plates and weapon ports. Some of the ships had markings painted on their hulls in bright colors. How many ships? Thelis asked. 43 vessels, Commander. Various sizes. The largest is approximately 2 kilometers long. They are moving toward us at high speed. Are they Kreeth reinforcements? No, sir. The technology is different. Their engines use fusion drives, very primitive compared to Council standards. They are broadcasting a message, but our translators are having difficulty. Play the message. Static filled the room. Then a voice came through, speaking in a harsh, quick language that the translators struggled to process. Finally, words appeared on Thelis's display. This is Captain Yuna of the United Earth Navy, 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. We received your distress call. Hang tight. Thelis felt ice in his blood. Earth? They are humans? Thelis looked up from her console, her eyes wide. Yes, Commander. The species from the Death World. The ones the Council has been debating about for months. Everyone in the Defense Center had heard about the humans. 5 months ago, a Council survey ship had discovered them. They came from a planet called Earth, a nightmare world where everything tried to kill everything else. The planet had predators everywhere. Diseases that could wipe out populations, weather that could destroy cities, and geological activity that shook the ground without warning. The humans had evolved in that hell. They were predators themselves, aggressive and violent. They had almost destroyed themselves in nuclear wars before finally reaching the stars. The Council had spent months debating whether to quarantine their system, whether to allow them contact with other species. And now they were here. Commander, what should we do? Palis asked. Thelis watched the human fleet accelerate toward the Kreeth. The humans were not slowing down. They were not broadcasting diplomatic messages. They were not requesting permission to enter Velen space. They were simply charging forward like missiles aimed at a target. Try to contact them, Thelis said. Tell them to be careful. The Kreeth have superior numbers and firepower. Palis sent the message. The response came back quickly. It was Captain Yuna's voice again, calm and cold. We see them. Thank you for the warning. Keep your people away from the orbital sector. This is going to get messy. Thelis wanted to say more, but the human fleet was already entering weapons range. He watched the displays, expecting the humans to slow down, to maneuver into defensive positions, to follow the standard patterns of space combat that every species used. The humans did none of those things. They accelerated harder, their fusion drives burning bright in the darkness. They launched missiles that moved faster than anything Thelis had ever seen. They fired weapons that threw pieces of metal at impossible speeds. And they did not stop. The Kreeth fleet turned to meet them. Admiral Vrek commanded the Kreeth invasion force, and he was confident. The humans had fewer ships. Their technology looked primitive. He sent a quarter of his fleet to deal with them quickly. Thelis watched what happened next and felt his understanding of the universe change. The human ships did not try to survive. They fought like creatures with nothing to lose. When Kreeth ships fired at them, the humans flew directly into the weapons fire, taking damage to get closer. When their missiles were destroyed, they fired more. When their armor was breached, they kept fighting. One human ship, smaller than the others, was hit by 3 Kreeth plasma cannons. Its hull cracked open, atmosphere venting into space. Thelis thought it was finished. But the ship turned hard and rammed directly into a Kreeth cruiser. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire. Did they just... Palis could not finish the sentence. Yes, Thelis whispered. They sacrificed themselves. All across the battlefield, the pattern repeated. The humans fought with a fury that defied logic. They protected the Velen stations with their own ships. They drew Kreeth fire away from civilian areas. They died to save people they had never met. And slowly, impossibly, they started winning. Thelis stood in the defense center and watched the species everyone called dangerous save his entire world. Captain Yuna stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, her hands gripped behind her back. Around her, the crew moved with practiced efficiency. Screens displayed enemy positions, weapon status, and damage reports. The bridge hummed with controlled chaos, but Yuna's voice cut through it all with perfect clarity. Minho, target their formation's left flank. Those 3 cruisers are bunched too close together. One missile spread should hurt all of them. Lieutenant Minho worked at the weapons console, his fingers dancing across the controls. Targeting solutions locked. Missiles away in 3, 2, 1. Launch. The Indomitable shuddered slightly as 12 missiles erupted from its launch tubes. They streaked through the darkness, their drives burning bright. The Kreeth tried to shoot them down, but human missiles were designed to be hard to kill. They jinked and weaved, their guidance systems reacting faster than any organic crew could manage. 3 missiles got through. They slammed into the Kreeth cruisers and detonated. The explosions tore through armor plating and into the ship's interiors. 2 of the cruisers went dark immediately. The third listed to one side, venting atmosphere and debris. "Good shooting," Una said calmly. "Now bring us about." "There is a Kreeth destroyer harassing one of the Velen stations. We need to deal with it." The Indomitable turned, its massive bulk moving with surprising grace. Una had commanded this ship for 2 years now, and she knew every system, every strength, every weakness. The ship was old by Earth standards, built back when humanity was still figuring out how to build warships that could survive in deep space. But age meant experience, and this ship had survived a dozen battles. On the view screen, Una could see the Kreeth destroyer firing on a Velen orbital station. The station's hull was already breached in several places. Small figures floated in space, Velen workers who had been blown out when the hull ruptured. Some of them were still alive, their suits keeping them breathing while they spun helplessly in the void. "Minho, put a railgun shot through that destroyer." "Right through the engine section." "Yes, Captain." The Indomitable's main railgun charged. It was a simple weapon, really. Take a piece of metal. Accelerate it using electromagnetic fields until it moves at a significant fraction of light speed. Let physics do the rest. The weapon had no explosives, no complex warhead. It did not need any. At those velocities, a metal slug carried enough kinetic energy to punch through anything. The railgun fired. The shot was invisible to the naked eye, moving too fast to see. But its effect was immediately obvious. The Kreeth destroyer simply broke apart, its rear half separating from the front in a spray of debris. The ship's reactor lost containment a second later, adding an explosion to the destruction. "Target destroyed," Minho reported. Una nodded. "Send a message to that Velen station. Tell them to evacuate now. We will cover them." She turned to her communications officer. "G1, what is our fleet status?" Lieutenant G1 looked up from her console. She was young, only 26, but she had steady hands and a sharp mind. "All ships reporting in, Captain. We have taken damage across the fleet. The destroyer Valiant lost its port weapons array. The frigate Swift has hull breaches on 3 decks. But no ships lost yet." "Yet," Una repeated quietly. She knew it was only a matter of time. The Kreeth outnumbered them significantly. But humans had learned long ago that numbers were not everything. Determination mattered. Tactics mattered. And sometimes, pure stubborn refusal to give up mattered most of all. Admiral Vrek watched the battle from his flagship and felt confusion growing into concern. The human ships should have been destroyed by now. They were smaller, fewer, and their technology was clearly inferior. But they fought with a ferocity he had never seen before. Kreeth warriors were fearless, trained from birth to conquer or die. But even Kreeth warriors valued their own lives. They fought to win, yes, but they also fought to survive. These humans seemed to have no such concerns. They threw themselves at his ships like missiles, accepting damage that should have forced them to retreat. One of his commanders had fired on a human frigate, expecting it to pull back. Instead, the human ship had accelerated forward, taking hits on its frontal armor while closing the distance. When it got close enough, it had fired point-blank into the Kreeth ship's bridge. Both ships were heavily damaged, but the Kreeth ship could no longer fight while the human frigate limped away, still firing. "All ships, reform formation," Vrek ordered. "These humans are more dangerous than expected. We will crush them with coordinated fire." But coordinating was harder than it should be. The humans moved unpredictably. They did not follow standard combat doctrines. They seemed to ignore tactical wisdom in favor of aggression. When Kreeth ships tried to surround them, the humans would charge at the strongest point in the formation instead of the weakest. When logic said they should retreat, they advanced. On the Velen homeworld, Commander Thelas watched the battle with growing amazement. His people had been saved before. They had seen other species fight to protect them. But those battles had been cautious, measured affairs. Ships maneuvered at safe distances. Commanders calculated odds and risks. Casualties were minimized. This was nothing like that. The humans fought like the universe was ending and they had nothing left to lose. They took risks that made Thelas's blood run cold. When a Kreeth battleship threatened to break through to the planet's surface, 3 human destroyers had positioned themselves directly in its path. They fired everything they had, their weapons glowing hot from continuous use. The battleship destroyed 2 of them, but the 3rd destroyer managed to disable the battleship's engines. The Kreeth ship drifted helplessly while other human vessels finished it off. "They are insane," Palis whispered. She stood beside Thelas, watching the displays with wide eyes. "They will all die." "Maybe," Thelas said slowly, "but they are dying to save us. I do not understand why, but they are." The battle raged for 6 hours. It was the longest 6 hours of Thelas's life. He watched human ships take damage that should have destroyed them, yet somehow keep fighting. He watched crews evacuate from crippled vessels seconds before they exploded. He watched Captain Yuna's calm voice coordinate her fleet across dozens of channels simultaneously. Finally, the Kreeth fleet began to break. Admiral Vrak had lost 2 many ships. His formation was in tatters. The humans had been hurt badly, but they showed no signs of stopping. They pursued every Kreeth ship that tried to retreat, harrying them all the way to the system's edge. When the last Kreeth vessel jumped to faster-than-light speed and fled, a strange silence fell over the battlefield. Debris floated everywhere, wreckage from both sides. The space around the Velen homeworld looked like a graveyard. Thelas took a deep breath. Around him, the defense center erupted in cheers. His people were celebrating, crying with relief, hugging each other. They were saved. Against all odds, they had survived. But Thelas could not celebrate. He kept thinking about the human ships that were now silent and dark, drifting among the debris. He thought about the crews who had died defending people they did not know. A world they had never seen before today. "Open a channel to the human flagship," Thelas said quietly. "Channel open." "Commander." "Captain Yuna, this is Commander Thelas of the Velen Defense Coordination. We do not have words to thank you properly. You saved us. Your people died for us." There was a pause. Then Captain Yuna's voice came through the speakers. She sounded tired, but still steady. "You needed help, Commander. We came. That is what we do." "But why?" Thelas asked. "We are strangers to you. You owe us nothing." Another pause. Longer this time. "Commander, on Earth we have a saying. When someone is drowning, you do not stop to ask if they are a friend before you pull them out of the water. You just pull them out. You called for help. We heard you. The rest does not matter." Thelas felt something break inside him. It was not sadness. It was the shattering of everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. The Galactic Council, with all their laws and procedures and civilized behavior, had been willing to let his people die. These humans, these Death Worlders everyone feared, had rushed across space to save them. "We would like to meet you, Captain. If you would honor us with your presence. We will come down in a few hours, Commander. We need to secure the area and search for survivors first. Both ours and yours." The channel closed. Thelas looked at Palis. His aide was staring at the displays, watching the human ships move through the debris field. They were using their sensors to find life pods and disabled vessels. They are still saving people, Pallas said softly. Even now, after the battle is over, they are still saving people. Thelis nodded slowly. The galaxy had just changed, and he was only beginning to understand how much. The transport shuttle landed in the main government plaza with a gentle hiss of engines. Thelis stood with the Velen leadership, watching as the ramp lowered. He felt nervous, though he tried not to show it. Around him, Consul Marath and the other officials waited in formal robes. They had prepared a proper greeting ceremony, the traditional way to welcome honored guests. The humans walked down the ramp, and Thelis felt his breath catch. They were shorter than he expected. Velen stood almost 3 meters tall, but these humans barely reached 2 meters. Yet they moved differently than any species Thelis had ever met. There was a grace to their movements, a fluidity that reminded him of the hunting cats he had seen in nature documentaries. Their eyes constantly moved, scanning the plaza, the buildings, the Velen officials. It was not paranoia, Thelis realized. It was awareness. Captain Yuna led the group. She wore a dark blue uniform with various insignia on the chest. Her black hair was pulled back tightly. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. Behind her came Lieutenant Jiwan and a tall, heavily built human male who Thelis guessed was a soldier based on the different uniform and the way he carried himself. "Commander Thelis," Yuna said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Thank you for receiving us." Thelis carefully took her hand. The human grip was firm, almost too firm. He could feel the strength in those fingers. Strength that came from evolution on a world where weakness meant death. Captain Yuna, Lieutenant Jiwan, and Thelis looked at the soldier. "Sergeant Hyan," the man said. His voice was deep and rough. "Marine Commander." Consul Marath stepped forward and began the formal greeting speech that Velen tradition required. He spoke for several minutes, praising the humans' courage and thanking them for their sacrifice. It was beautiful language, carefully chosen, the kind of speech that had been given at important moments for thousands of years. Yuna listened politely, but Thelis noticed her eyes never stopped moving. She was still scanning for threats, even here in the safest location on the planet. It made him sad somehow that these humans could never truly relax. When the speech ended, Marath invited them inside to the council chambers. The building was ancient, its walls carved with the history of the Velen people. Inside, long tables had been arranged with food and drink. The Velen had prepared their finest dishes, though Thelis suddenly worried that humans might not be able to eat Velen food. They sat, and Jiwan immediately pulled out a small device. "Do you mind if I scan the food? We need to make sure it is safe for us to consume. Different biology and all." "Of course," Mara said. "We should have thought of that." While Jiwan worked, Yuna looked around the chamber. "This is a beautiful building. How old is it?" "Almost 3,000 years, Thelis said. "It was built when our people first united under one government." 3,000 years of peace, Yuna said quietly. "That is remarkable." "Not peace anymore," Marath said, and there was bitterness in his voice. "The Kreeth took that from us." An uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, Thelis asked the question that had been bothering him since the battle ended. "Captain, you said you received our distress call, but we sent that call to the Galactic Council, to our allies. How did you intercept it?" Jiwan looked up from her food scanner. "We have been monitoring Council frequencies since we made contact with them 5 months ago. We do not have formal membership, so we listen to what is happening in the galaxy. When your distress call came through, we tracked its origin and came as fast as we could." "But the Council should have responded," Marath insisted. "We have been members for centuries. We have treaties. Why did they not send help?" Yuna's expression did not change, but something cold entered her eyes. "Lieutenant, Show them the communications logs. G1 worked on her device for a moment, then projected a holographic display above the table. It showed a timeline of messages. The first was the Velen distress call, desperate and pleading. The second was the Council's response. Thelas read it and felt sick. Your request for emergency intervention has been received and logged. The matter will be discussed at the next scheduled Security Committee meeting. Please maintain situation reports every 12 hours. Council procedures require a full vote before peacekeeping forces can be deployed to disputed territories. The meeting was scheduled for 3 weeks from the distress call. 3 weeks. The Velen would have been conquered or destroyed long before then. Disputed territories? Marith stood up, his voice shaking. This is our home. We have lived here for thousands of years. The Kreeth invaded us. The Council views it as a border dispute, G1 said gently. Technically, the Kreeth have a legal argument. Some of the systems they claim were unoccupied when they first surveyed them, even though Velen historical records show you had rights to those systems for centuries. The Council would need to verify all the legal documentation before authorizing intervention. We would have died, Palis whispered. She sat beside Thelas, staring at the holographic display. Our allies were going to let us die because of paperwork. Sergeant Hyan spoke for the first time since sitting down. It is a common problem with large organizations. They become more concerned with following rules than doing what is right. We have seen it before, even on Earth. Thelas looked at Captain Yuna. Why did you come? You do not know us. We are not your allies. The Council calls your species dangerous, unstable. I have heard the reports. They say humans are too aggressive, but you barely stopped yourselves from self-destruction. Why would you risk your lives for us? Yuna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but firm. Commander, humanity almost did destroy itself. We fought terrible wars. We built weapons that could turn our whole planet into ash. For a long time, we were our own worst enemy. But we learned something from all that destruction. We learned that strength without purpose is just violence. We learned that having power means having responsibility to use it correctly. She leaned forward, her eyes meeting Phyllis's. You called for help. You were dying, and no one was coming. We heard you, and we had the ability to do something about it. What kind of species would we be if we just ignored that? If we sat back and said, not our problem, while people were murdered? That is not strength. That is cowardice dressed up as wisdom. But your people died, Marith said. You lost ships. You lost crew. For strangers. Yes, Yuna said simply. We did. And every one of them knew the risks before they joined the Navy. We do not force anyone to serve. But the people who do serve understand what we stand for. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We answer calls for help. That is the deal. That is why we wear these uniforms. G1 added, on Earth, we have a concept called humanity. It is not just the name of our species. It is an idea about how we treat each other, about compassion and connection. We extend that to everyone we meet. It is who we are. Thelas felt tears forming in his eyes. His people cried when they were sad, but also when they were moved by something beautiful. This was both. The galaxy thinks you are dangerous, he said. We are dangerous, Sergeant Hyan said bluntly. Very dangerous. Earth made us that way. We are predators. We are aggressive. We can be violent. But dangerous is not the same as evil. A soldier is dangerous, but a soldier can protect people. A weapon is dangerous, but in the right hands, it saves lives. The question is not whether we are dangerous. The question is who we are dangerous to. And who are you dangerous to? Palis asked. Yuna smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of something that had teeth and knew how to use them. We are dangerous to bullies, to tyrants, to anyone who thinks they can hurt innocent people and face no consequences. The Kreef learned that today. They will not forget it. The conversation continued for hours. The humans explained their history, their culture, their philosophy. They talked about Earth, about the struggles that shaped them. They told stories about wars and peace, about mistakes and growth. The Velen listened and learned. They realized that the humans were not what the Council said they were. Yes, they were dangerous. Yes, they came from a violent world. But they had taken that violence and shaped it into something else. They had become protectors instead of conquerors. As the sun set over the plaza, casting long shadows through the windows, Thalos watched Captain Yuna speak with Consul Marith about defensive strategies. He saw Lieutenant G1 show Palus pictures of Earth, of the blue oceans and green forests. He saw Sergeant Hyon laugh at something one of the other officials said. These were the Deathworlders. These were the species everyone feared, and Thalos had never felt safer in his life. 2 weeks passed like a dream that Thalos was afraid to wake from. The human fleet remained in orbit, repairing their damaged ships while helping the Velen rebuild their shattered defenses. Every day brought new surprises. The humans worked with an efficiency that amazed the Velen engineers. They shared their technology freely, teaching the Velen how to reinforce station hulls and install basic defensive systems. Sergeant Hyon had taken over training Velen volunteers in basic combat. Thalos watched one of these training sessions from an observation deck. Below, a group of young Velen tried to follow Hyon's instructions. They were not very good at it. The Velen body was not built for fighting. They were tall and thin, with long limbs better suited for reaching high branches than throwing punches. But Hyon was patient. He showed them how to use their reach as an advantage. He taught them to think about protecting others rather than attacking enemies. You do not need to be warriors, he told them. You need to be guardians. There's a difference. Minho worked with the Velen engineers, sharing techniques from Earth's naval history. He showed them how ancient human sailors had reinforced ship hulls using simple principles of stress distribution. The technology was old, but the physics was universal. The Velen learned quickly, their natural curiosity overcoming their initial fear. G1 spent hours with Palus and other Velen researchers. She explained human psychology, the concept of pack bonding, the way humans formed emotional connections with almost anything. We bonded with wolves 30,000 years ago and turned them into dogs, she said. We bond with our ships. We bond with our weapons. We even bond with plants. It is just what we do. So when we heard your distress call, we bonded with you too. You became our pack, even though we had never met you. Thalos found himself spending most of his time with Captain Yuna. They talked about everything: politics, philosophy, history, war. She told him about Earth's world wars, conflicts so terrible they nearly destroyed human civilization. She explained how humanity had finally learned to cooperate, forming the United Nations and later the United Earth Government. We still fight among ourselves sometimes, Yuna admitted one evening as they stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Humans will probably always argue and compete, but we learn to channel that energy into productive things: sports, exploration, scientific research. And when someone threatens us or our friends, we remember how to fight together. I am glad you do, Thalos said quietly. The alarm shattered the peaceful night. Thalos ran to the defense center, his heart pounding. The displays showed a nightmare. Ships were emerging from faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. The display kept updating as more and more vessels appeared. What is that? Palus gasped, staring at the screens. The Kreef, Thalos whispered. They came back. This was not the raiding force from before. This was a full battle fleet, the kind the Kreeth Dominion sent when they wanted to make an example of someone. The flagship alone was larger than the entire human fleet. Captain Yuna's voice came through the communication system. Commander Thalos, we see them. How long until the Council fleet arrives? The Council? Thalos felt cold spread through his body. They sent a message yesterday. A diplomatic envoy is on the way. They will arrive in 4 weeks to negotiate a ceasefire. There was a long silence on the channel. Then Yuna spoke again, and her voice was very calm. Too calm. 4 weeks. I see. That is unfortunate timing. Captain, you need to leave, Thalos said urgently. That fleet will destroy you. Your ships are still damaged. You are outnumbered 100 to 1. You must save your people. Commander, open a video channel, please. Yuna's face appeared on the screen. She stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, surrounded by her crew. Behind her, Thalos could see Minho and G1 at their stations. They looked tense but determined. Captain, please, Thalos begged. You have already done so much for us. You do not need to die here. Commander, 2 weeks ago, I told you something. I said we came because you needed help. That promise does not have an expiration date. But you cannot win this fight. Yuna smiled slightly. Probably not. But we can buy you time. We can make it expensive for them. We can protect your evacuation ships while you get your people to safety. She paused. We do not leave until everyone is safe. That is the deal. No, Mara's voice cut in. The consul had entered the defense center, his robes disheveled. No, I will not allow more humans to die for us. I will offer the Kreeth our surrender. Perhaps they will show mercy. Sergeant Hyan's voice came through a different channel. He was down on the surface with the volunteer trainees. Consul, with respect, the Kreeth do not show mercy. We have seen their records. When they conquer, they enslave. Your people will spend generations in chains. Is that what you want? It is better than genocide, Marath shouted. Maybe, Yuna said quietly, but you are not alone anymore. You have friends now, and friends do not abandon each other. Thalos watched the displays as the human fleet moved into defensive positions around the planet. 43 ships, many of them damaged, facing a force that could crush them like insects. It was suicide. It was insane. That it was the most beautiful thing Thalos had ever seen. Captain, he said, his voice breaking. Why? Why would you do this? Yuna looked directly into the camera. Because someone has to. Because if everyone always chooses safety over doing what is right, then eventually there is nothing left worth being safe for. And because you are our friends now, Commander. We do not abandon our friends. The channel closed. Thalos watched the human fleet prepare for battle. Around him, the defense center was chaos. People shouted orders. Evacuation plans were activated. Transport ships launched from the surface, carrying civilians to underground shelters and distant stations. Palus grabbed Thalos' arm. We should evacuate too. The government needs to survive. No, Thalos said. I am staying. If the humans can stand and fight, then I can stand and watch. I will not run while they die for us. The Kreeth fleet entered the inner system. At its head was the flagship Domination, a massive vessel bristling with weapons. The commander was War Master Throck, the Kreeth Dominion's most successful military leader. He had conquered 17 species. He had never lost a battle. His message to the Velen was simple: surrender now or be destroyed. You have 1 hour. Captain Yuna sent a different message. You want this world? Come and take it. The hour passed in terrible silence. Thalos watched the clock count down. He saw the Velen civilians fleeing the cities. He saw the human ships holding formation, He saw the Kreeth fleet advancing slowly, confidently, like a wave that knew it would eventually crash over everything. At 59 minutes, 3 more human fleets emerged from faster-than-light travel. Thelis stared at the displays in shock. More ships, dozens of them, bearing the same United Earth Navy insignia. They had come from other systems, rushing to help their fellow humans. But even with reinforcements, the humans were still outnumbered 3-1. The Kreeth had expected this. War Master Throck had prepared for human reinforcements. His fleet adjusted formation smoothly, ready to destroy the newcomers along with the original defenders. Thelis looked at Pallas. His aide was crying. So was he. They were going to watch good people die, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Captain Yuna's voice came through one last time before the battle began. All ships, this is Yuna. I will not lie to you. Today will be hard. Some of us will not see tomorrow. But we are not here for glory or conquest. We are here because people need help, and we have the power to give it. That makes this worth fighting for. That makes this worth dying for. Let us show these Kreeth what happens when they threaten humanity's friends. Let us show the galaxy what we stand for. A pause. Then, softer. For Earth, for the Velen, for everyone who cannot fight for themselves. The human fleet charged forward. The Kreeth fleet met them, and the sky above the Velen homeworld turned into fire. The battle was like nothing Thelis had ever imagined. War Master Throck commanded his fleet with the precision of a master strategist. He divided the human forces, trying to separate their ships and destroy them individually. He used his numerical advantage to create kill zones where multiple Kreeth vessels could focus fire on single human targets. It was textbook strategy, proven over centuries of conquest. But the humans did not follow any textbook. When Throck tried to surround a group of human destroyers, they did not retreat. They accelerated toward the thickest concentration of enemy ships, firing as they went. When logic said they should preserve their forces, they spent them freely to protect Velen evacuation transports. When any reasonable commander would have withdrawn, they pushed forward. The Indomitable led the charge. Captain Yuna's flagship was already damaged from the previous battle, its armor scarred and patched. But it flew like a weapon aimed at the heart of the Kreeth fleet. Minho fired the railguns with surgical precision, each shot carefully calculated to cause maximum damage. Jiwan coordinated with the other human ships, creating a tactical network that allowed them to move as one organism. Multiple missiles incoming. Someone shouted on the Indomitable's bridge. Point defense full spread, Yuna ordered calmly. Helm, rotate us 40 degrees starboard. Put the damaged section away from their firing line. The ship shuddered as point defense cannons fired streams of metal into space, intercepting the incoming missiles. Most exploded before reaching the hull. 2 got through, slamming into the Indomitable's armor. The ship rocked but held. Armor breach on deck 7, Jiwan reported. Sealing bulkheads now. Keep us in the fight, Yuna said. She watched the tactical display, seeing the larger pattern of the battle. The Kreeth were trying to push through to the planet. 3 human frigates moved to intercept, but they were taking heavy fire. They would not last long. Minho, target that Kreeth battleship. The one moving toward our frigate group. Put everything we have into it. Captain, that will drain our capacitors. We will be vulnerable for 90 seconds while they recharge. Do it. The Indomitable's weapons fired as one. Railgun shots, missiles, laser arrays, everything. The combined barrage slammed into the Kreeth battleship's shields. The shields held for 3 seconds, then collapsed. The weapons' fire tore into the battleship's hull, ripping through armor and into the ship's interior. The battleship's engines exploded, sending the massive vessel tumbling out of formation. The 3 human frigates used the opportunity to escape, limping toward the planet where they could find cover among the orbital stations. But Yuna had been right about the vulnerability. For 90 seconds, the Indomitable's main weapons were offline. Throck noticed immediately and redirected fire toward the human flagship. "Incoming fire from multiple vectors," Jiwan said, her voice tight. "Captain, we need to move." "Negative. Hold position. We are protecting that evacuation transport." Yuna pointed at the display, where a Velen civilian ship was trying to reach the planet's surface. It was packed with thousands of Velen families, fleeing the battle. Throck saw the same thing. He ordered his ships to target the transport. Knowing the humans would have to choose between saving themselves and saving the Velen civilians, the humans did not hesitate. The Indomitable moved directly into the line of fire. So did two other human ships, a destroyer named Valiant and a frigate called Swift. They positioned themselves between the Kreeth weapons and the civilian transport. Thelas watched from the planet's surface, his hands gripping the console so hard his fingers hurt. He wanted to look away, but could not. The Kreeth fired. Energy beams and plasma bolts converged on the three human ships. The Valiant's shields collapsed first. The ship's armor melted under the sustained fire. But the crew kept the ship in position until the last possible moment. When the order to evacuate finally came, half the crew did not make it to the escape pods. The ship exploded in a ball of fire, but the civilian transport was safe behind it. The Swift lasted longer, its smaller size making it harder to hit. But eventually, the Kreeth fire found its mark. The frigate broke apart, its reactor going critical. The explosion took two Kreeth cruisers with it. The Indomitable survived, but barely. Its armor was breached in a dozen places. The ship vented atmosphere and debris. On the bridge, Yuna held onto her command chair as the ship shook. "Damage report," she ordered. "Life support failing on decks 4 through 8. We have lost main engines. Maneuvering thrusters only. Weapons capacitors at 30%. The civilian transport? Safe on the surface, Captain." Yuna nodded. "Good. That is good." On the surface, Thelas watched the Indomitable drift, clearly crippled. Other human ships were in similar condition. The battle had been raging for hours, and the humans were losing. Not because they lacked courage, but because mathematics eventually won. There were simply too many Kreeth ships. "They are going to die," Thelas whispered. "All of them. They are going to die for us." Thelas could not answer. His voice was gone, lost to grief and helpless rage. Then something changed. War Master Throck had been so focused on destroying the human fleet that he had not noticed the pattern. Every time his ships advanced toward the planet, the humans forced them to pay a terrible price. Every meter of space cost him ships and crew. His fleet was winning, but they were bleeding. And while they bled, the humans had been doing something else. They had been hurting the Kreeth fleet, subtly pushing them into a specific formation. The Kreeth ships were now clustered together, concentrated in a relatively small area of space. Too late. Throck realized the trap. The humans had been preparing for this moment. Every one of their remaining ships, including those too damaged to fight effectively, suddenly fired their maneuvering thrusters. They moved in unison, accelerating away from the Kreeth fleet. Then they fired every missile they had left. Hundreds of missiles streaked through space, all targeted at the same point in the middle of the Kreeth formation. Throck tried to order evasive maneuvers, but his ships were too close together. They could not move without colliding with each other. The missiles did not target individual ships. They targeted the space between the ships. When they detonated, the explosions created a cascading effect. Ships collided with debris. Energy weapons misfired into friendly vessels. The tight formation that Throck had maintained became a death trap. The center of the Kreeth fleet simply disintegrated. Throg's flagship Domination was at the edge of the destruction. It survived, but it was heavily damaged. The War Master stared at the wreckage of his fleet, unable to process what had just happened. He had never lost a battle. He had conquered 17 species. He was the Dominion's greatest commander, and a handful of humans from a primitive Deathworld had just destroyed his fleet. Captain Yuna's voice came through on an open channel. BROADCAST to every ship in the system. War Master Throg, this is Captain Yuna. You have one chance to leave this system with what remains of your fleet. If you do not take it, we will finish what we started. Choose quickly. Throg wanted to fight. Every instinct told him to avenge his losses, to crush these impudent humans. But he was also a realist. He had lost 2/3 of his fleet. The humans were battered, but they showed no signs of surrendering. And more importantly, they had just demonstrated a tactical creativity that he could not match. All ships, retreat, he ordered, the words like poison in his mouth. Jump to hyperspace immediately. The surviving Kreeth vessels fled, disappearing into faster-than-light travel. In moments, the system was clear of enemy ships. Silence fell across the battlefield. Thelis stood in the defense center, surrounded by his people. No one spoke. No one could. They had witnessed something impossible. They had seen humanity win. Captain Yuna, Thelis finally said into the communication system. Are you still there? Still here, Commander. Yuna's voice came through, weak but alive. The Indomitable is not going anywhere fast, but we are here. You won. We survived. That is all. You saved us. Again. A long pause. Then, we did our job. That is all we ever wanted to do. Hours later, as the rescue operations continued and the human ships were towed to repair stations, something else happened. A new fleet arrived in the system. These ships were elegant and advanced, bearing the insignia of the Galactic Council. The diplomatic envoy had finally arrived. 4 weeks late. Ambassador Kellerus, a proud member of the Council's senior diplomatic corps, sent a formal message to the Velen government. We have come to negotiate a peaceful resolution to the recent hostilities. The Council wishes to hear grievances from both the Velen Commonwealth and the Kreeth Dominion in order to reach a fair settlement. Consul Mareth stood to respond, but Thelis stopped him. Let me, he said quietly. He opened a channel to the Council fleet. When he spoke, his voice was clear and cold. Ambassador Kellerus, you are no longer needed here. The Kreeth have been defeated. The hostilities, as you call them, are over. You may return to the Council and inform them that we no longer require their services. I do not understand. Who defeated the Kreeth? We receive no reports of military intervention from Council forces. The humans defeated them. The species you call too dangerous to trust. The Deathworlders you have been debating about for months. They heard our call for help, and they answered. Where were you, Ambassador?